All right. So we want to welcome you all to our webinar workshop this beautiful Friday morning. So we appreciate you spending a small part of your day with us. My name is Brian Griffin, a marketing assistant here at Messer Financial Group. And many of you, you're already familiar with Messer Financial, but in case you don't know, we are an agent focused FMO located here in Mint Hill, North Carolina. So we started with just 2 agents, and we are now serving thousands of agents across 40 states, and we are still growing. So sometimes we have two words that are very similar in sound, but very different in meaning when placed in proper context. Now, as insurance agents, we sit with or we talk to hundreds of people throughout our year, hopefully hundreds. And as we go through the process of walking people through through a sale, sales objections arise. But keep in mind that an objection is not a rejection. So we have to learn how to handle the objection properly and move forward. So today we have Ken Smith here to speak with you on how to handle objections. Now, Ken is the author of the best-selling Sales Lessons from the Masters. With over 40 years in the insurance industry, he's dedicated to training agents and bringing out the best results in all of us through subtle but effective changes. So before we do get started, I want to go over the housekeeping rules. So we're going to hold all questions until the end of the presentation. If you do have questions, type them in the box on the right-hand side of your screen, and we'll address your question at the end of the presentation. So now, without any further delay, Mr. Ken Smith.
Great. Thanks, Brian. I want to welcome everyone to this webinar this morning, and I want you to know everyone attending this is by special invitation. We did not send the invitation out to everyone. We sent it to the people who have attended a couple of my previous webinars. And we're doing this webinar because of the feedback from you. When we did the needs analysis the last time, we heard you say, "Hey, I want you to spend some time on handling objections." So we're doing that this morning. And at the end of this, I'm going to ask for your feedback on another topic. But first, it's important that we understand the value of persistence. There was a salesman who visited a potential buyer at the end of the day. The prospect said to him, "You should be honored. Do you know I've refused to see 12 salesmen?" The salesman said, "I know, because I'm them." Now, that's persistence. And, not only do we need to be persistent with our prospects, we need to be persistent and disciplined in our growth and development. My goal is for you to take away some ideas from today's webinar and take those and use those ideas to grow yourself personally and to grow your business and take it to the next level. We're going to break the session down into really 3 parts. One is with the objections. One is the approach, objections, the objections to the meeting. The second is, how does your presentation, what part does it play in the type and number of objections you get? And then lastly, the third part is we're going to break it down to some specific objections and how you handle those objections. One of the things I always joke about is I tell people I've only had one original idea myself, and that one got me into trouble. All I've done with selling is that I steal ideas from others and apply those to myself and make them part of me. And I've shared this on some of the other webinars, is that until I wrote my book, I had totally forgot where a lot of who my ideas came from, because I used them over the years and they just became such a part of me. There was no thought there. And what I want you to do today is basically take some of the ideas, listen to the ideas that we go through, and then if you like them, make them part of what you're doing. The objections to the meeting, um, the most common are, I can't afford it, I'm insurance poor, I already have an insurance agent. Those are the most common objections, that you get in the approach. And what I'm going to do is give you a couple ideas that, with handling those objections, that you can use almost no matter what the problem is. One of the most effective ones that I've had through the year is when someone gives me an objection to meeting is, may I ask you a question? There is a story that back in the 1800s, um, Congress was going to vote on closing the patent office. They thought everything that had been invented could be invented was already invented. And you stop and think about this. Since then, we've had the most incredible things that have been invented. You can go from cars to planes to computers to smartphones to the great advances in medical technology. So my question for you is, have you closed your patent office? I have new concepts and ideas in life insurance, or you can put health insurance in there. All I want to do is run them past you. If they fit in with your philosophy and needs, fine. If not, I'll be on my way. Another way to approach it is when someone has an objection to meeting is, I can understand why you would say that. And I'll take that into consideration when we get together. When would be the best time for us to get together? And then the other one is I got from Frank Betcher, who's one of my sales masters. When the objection comes up, like, I'm insurance poor, can I ask you why you feel that way? One of the most important things is, if you get to a point where you understand that the great salespeople in our business sell by asking questions. Think about this. With using questions, you can ask your way into far more sales than you can talk your way. If I ask you a question and you know the answer, you're glad I asked it. And it's the same way with the prospects that we're talking with. I'm going to give you some questions, and I've talked about Socrates. With these questions, you know exactly how the person's going to answer, and they work great in objections that come up in the approach process of the sale. You do want to take care of your family if anything happened to you. I mean, everyone's going to answer that question, yes. The second question is, do you want to make sure you have the best health insurance plan for you? And then, the one I always use with final expense is, you don't want to have your family or your children to worry about paying for your funeral and final expenses. So my question for you is, do you get the same objection on a consistent basis? If you do, one of the places to really look at dealing with that is your sales presentation. Having a sales process and with a script, it really helps you become your best self when you're selling. And the reason for that is because you're prepared. And one of the things I always look at working with agents is that if what you're doing isn't working, usually the place you have to start is with your presentation. And one of the most important things that you can do is practice your presentation. And it can be torturous, but one of the things that I always recommend is that you record yourself and listen to it. And it is amazing how listening to yourself, how much you can learn and how you can pick up spots where you can really improve your presentation. Last week I was on a Zoom call, and it was a woman who was in the ballet and then went into sales. And it was really interesting because she used an analogy and something I had no idea about before. But at the end of some of the major ballets, um, the dancer spins around on one toe 32 times. And she said, "You will never believe this, but the people who are really into it count those number of spins." But she said, to get to a point where you can do the 32 spins without a problem, you have to do 64 of them in class. And she said, when you start out, you keep falling down on a regular basis. But the fact that you keep working on it, you get to the point where you can do those 64 spins on one toe and then go out for the performance and do 32 spins. That is so much what, the same with what we do. It's important that we invest the time to grow and get better. And I'm going to mention something to that. So if you're in the senior market, Karen Steigers did a presentation on Medicare yesterday. She shared with on the webinar her sales presentation for the Medicare market. And I will say she has a great sales process. And if you want to learn or help to build a great sales process for the Medicare market, go watch the replay of Karen's presentation. And one of the reasons it's so important to practice your presentation, and the more you give your presentation, is the more confident you become. And the more confident you become, your confidence transfers to your prospect. Human emotions are transferable. And if you're confident going in and confident presenting with your presentation, that's going to carry over to your prospect, and it will really reduce the number of objections you get. Because bottom line with what we do, your prospect has a problem, and we should be excited because what we're doing is we're going in and solving that problem for the prospect. And guess what? If the prospect doesn't solve the problem, that problem stays with them. So we're doing an important service for the prospects that we're dealing with. One of the things that I used to say, tell agents, is that if you ever say, "Do you want to buy this?" Just picture me coming over this desk or this chair and attacking you because you said that. That's actually one of the worst things you can say. I would rather have you do this, and this works if you are just presenting one plan. Do you feel this plan does everything you want done by your insurance plan? And if the prospect says yes, then go right to filling out the application. The other thing in the presentation is when you get down to the part where you're going to close, it is important that you give them at least two options. Mr. or Ms. Prospect, which alternative, A or B, fits in best with your situation, and then let them choose between the two. It's so important to give them yes options. And I put this slide in here just to remind you, objections are good and indicate interest. Where there are no objections, there is no interest. Now, that said, I'm going to tell you, I hate objections. When I'm doing a presentation, I want to go through the presentation and close. That's my ideal situation. But guess what? Objections are part of what we do. And when they happen, What we need to do is embrace them. And the other side of that too is I would rather have someone tell me I want them to think it over than just sit there and say flat, no, I'm not interested. So keep that in mind. Um, I think with handling objections, there's actually, I've got two parts here, but there's really a third part. The first thing we need to do with when we get an objection is we need to be active listeners. We really need to stop and listen to what the prospect is saying. Because a lot of times, if the prospect is putting up an objection, we're running right away to how are we going to handle that and what are we going to say? So we need to be an active listener. And I always say God gave us two ears and one mouth because he wants us to do twice as much listening as talking. The other thing that's really important is when you get an objection, to repeat the objection. You want to make sure that you understand what the objection is. And then the third part of this is not countering the objection, but just asking follow-up questions. And what you're going to see is that with handling objections and the examples I'm going to give you, it's all about asking follow-up questions. When you get an objection, and sometimes you get some really crazy things. So you get them to repeat it and then ask the question, why do you say that? What makes you think it's so important? And sometimes when you get those crazy, objections and the prospects try to explain it, and it makes no sense, it'll click for them that what they're saying doesn't make any sense, and it'll take care of that objection. Objections, again, this is my reminder, they tell you how well you're doing as part of the sales process. Again, if you get the same objection on a consistent basis, what it means is that there's something in your sales process that is a problem. I mean, it could be you're going through the material too fast. It could be that something you're communicating is not coming through clearly to the prospect. But I always go back, if I'm getting objections on a regular basis, always go back and look at the sales presentation and what am I doing with the sales presentation that I can do differently to handle that objection. With handling objections, here's another approach. Ms. Prospect, obviously you have a good reason for saying that. Would you mind telling me why you feel that way? Notice again, all we're doing when the objections come up, we're asking questions. And what the questions do is it's really helping the prospect think through, does this objection really make any sense? So what are the most common objections that you get as part of the presentation? Number one is I want to think it over. And so why do you get that objection? What the prospect is saying is that they haven't yet decided to buy from you. That could be one reason. The second is you haven't explained it clearly, or the prospect just doesn't get what you're saying. And what I always do at first when that objection comes up is I'll ask, is there something that you have a question about? The other thing is I want to think it over, is I'll always ask the question, what additional information do you hope to learn that will help you make a decision? Because most of the time when they're thinking it over, there's really a couple issues at place. They could have they might be lacking the confidence. They might not understand something. And then, there's always the potential people are hesitant to make a decision. And, the fact is, most people make their best decisions not when they wait to make a decision and think it over, but they make the best decisions when the information is fresh in their mind. Another way to handle that is whether you do buy or do not buy, you're making a decision today. Does it make sense to expose your family to death or illness when you can protect them for X amount of dollars that you really won't miss? One of the things, one of the other ones I've used a couple times, and it takes a high confidence level to do this, is uh, when someone raises the objection, I want to think it over. Um, I've asked a question, don't you trust me? And no one's going to say, very few people will say, hey, I don't trust you. And I'll say, okay, let's get on with it. And my additional response to that is, you know, um, you have a problem, Mr. or Miss Prospect. I have the solution. And whether you buy or don't buy, that problem still exists. You can let me solve that problem for you and take your problem with me when I leave. Another common objection is I want to shop around. Um, and I'm going to give you a couple ways to handle that question. One of the great things about this business, where we've come a long way, is with technology. One way to handle that question is, okay, what other companies do you want to take a look at? And we've got access to most of the major companies. Just ask them, hey, what do you want? I can help you shop around right now. Who else would you like to take a look at? And then just let them name some companies, or in most cases they'll say, nah, that's okay. This one is really powerful. Mr. or Ms. Prospect, please shop around. But in the meantime, let me get you approved. It'll take a couple of weeks to get a policy, and then you have another 30 days after that, the 30-day free look in the policy. If you find something during that time, apply for that policy. And then when I come back to deliver the policy, we'll sit down and compare. I have always liked using the free look, and here's part of the reason. Early in my career, the first big sale I ever made, I was with my manager, and the person, the manager said, the prospect said, I want to think it over. And my manager jumped in and said, okay, why don't we do this? Well, you're thinking over, let us look you over. And he said, there's a 30-day free look in the policy, and we'll come back and we'll deliver the policy. And if you change your mind and you got all that time to think about it, you can cancel the policy at that point in time. So the guy wrote the check, said, hey, you want to write the check for this, you're covered. You can get your money back. And it worked great. And it's still funny because I can still picture the house that we were in when we made the sale. You got the other thing where you get it occasionally where I want to talk it over with my kids. And my response is, great, let's get them qualified or get them involved. Let's see if you qualify. It'll take a couple weeks to get the policy. Then you have a free 30-day free look. When I deliver your policy, your kids can join us. I can address any questions they have. I want to talk it over with my spouse. This one, it can be a legitimate, ideally it's best to have both partners together when you do a presentation. But the but if it's not legitimate, there's a couple questions that you can ask to determine if it's legitimate. And I say, hey, that makes sense. Do you think your husband will have some objections? And they'll say yes, or if they say yes, then I'm going to say, what do you think he'll say? And if he says the price is too high, then I'm going to say, okay, how do you feel about it? Because if she says then that the price is too high, the problem is not the husband. The problem is she feels the price is too high. So those questions drive out those things. The other thing is, another common objection is I can't afford it. And this is one of the reasons. If you've watched gone through my needs analysis or my final expense presentation, this is one of the reasons why I always ask for a premium commitment as part of the presentation, because that takes away the objection that I can't afford it. And the questions I ask, in response to that are, would spending the money make a difference in your lifestyle? And you'll remember, I always take everything down to a daily cost basis, and I'll use the question, or the comment that on a daily cost basis, that's less than a cup of coffee, or it's less than lunch at McDonald's. It put the premium in perspective. And one of the things I'll come back and ask when this comes up too is, do you like the plan? And if they say yes, I'm going to come back and ask again later on, what amount do you feel you could set aside? And then I'll lower the benefit to match the premium. So we hit on objections. We went through it really, really quickly. If you want help with specific objections, email me, and we can set up a time to talk. I can help you with your presentation. One of the things that is as important as your presentation, an important part of what we do, is basically your attitude. And what I want you to think about is, if you were president of your own company, would you buy stock in that company? Because what happens in this business, you are president of your own company. And the question and the thing I want you to think about is, what do you have to do to increase the value of your company? And what I would really recommend is basically take a time, an hour by yourself, and just go through and start hitting on thinking about, what do you need to improve? What do you need to do to become better at what you're doing? Peter Drucker was a management consultant, and really back in the 1970s, 1980s. And he said, activity is important, but results are more important. There's nothing so useless as doing efficiently that which should not be done at all. And, my question is, are you focusing on the parts of your business that really need to be focused on? It's important that you really take the time to say, what is really going to get me results? I've seen, 40 years in this business, I've seen agents that are busy and very unsuccessful because they have lots of activity, they work hard, but they're not getting the results because they've never really stopped to take the time to focus on the important things that are going to generate business. And that's really important to us at Messer Financial. We understand that your activity is important. We want to help you make sure you're doing the right activities. And ultimately, if you're doing the right activities, that's going to lead to results. I'm mentioning attitude a little bit this morning. because, like I said, I think that's so important. The law of attraction is you are a living magnet, and you attract into your life the people and circumstances that are in harmony with your dominant thought. Um, I always think back, the best example of this I can think back to is when I was writing a book. I was on the chapter on W. Clement Stone and really felt like it was missing something. There was a marketing group that was in the office, and I was meeting with them, and I was telling one of the guys there about the book I was working on, and he said, "You need to talk to Bob Boyarjian. He worked with Stone, and he's the perfect person that you talk with and really get the insight that you're looking for." And what the amazing thing was, Bob lived in Phoenix, and I was traveling to Phoenix the next week, and we got together, and it was fantastic. One of the things, as I was putting this presentation together, I thought about Earl Nightengale. When I started in the insurance business, almost every company, as part of their training program, included Earl Nightingale's The Strangest Secret. And I put it out there on YouTube. And if you've never heard it, now you got to remember it's like 60 years, it was 60 years old. But it is one of the most powerful audio things that you can listen to as a salesperson and really impact your life. Earl Nightingale was considered the dean of motivation. Um, he was a broadcaster, but he also owned part of an agency with the Franklin Life Insurance Company. And he used to go, and the agents back in those days had meetings on Saturday mornings, and he would go meet with them on Saturday mornings. And The Strangest Secret is one of the messages that he delivered to them on a Saturday. And what he says is that he was trying to figure out what the key was to success. And he said he searched for it for 20 years. And finally, he picked up Think and Go Rich in a bookstore, and he read the words, "You become what you think about." And he said that just changed everything. So I would recommend that you go to YouTube, and it's available on there, and just throw in Earl Nightingale, The Strangest Secret, and listen to it. It can have a dramatic impact on your business. One of the things that we're looking at doing is starting at Messer Financial, starting a podcast. And one of the things I said I wanted your input on something. I'd love to have your input on topics. And I'm going to ask you, email me. What I'd like to know is what topics, what would you like to listen to that would help you grow your business? What are you interested in growing on the health insurance side? So give it some thought, and you can email me. It's ksmith@messerfinancial.com. So, Brian, do we have any questions?
Yeah, we do have just a few questions. As you were just going through that, Ken, I was thinking about, as far as objections, and I'm someone that I watch boxing, and I watch people train for boxing a lot. And one of the things that a lot of boxers do is, with their trainers, they'll hit the mitts, and then the trainer will swing back, and they'll duck to the side, or they'll duck under. And when you train for those counter punches, you tend to be able to move with the punches better and dodge them because you train for them. And I look at those counter punches like objections. When you haven't trained for them, it makes you afraid to go through your process or throw your punch confidently because you're afraid of the counter punch that might be coming back. So what you were just saying initially when you were talking about having a structured and solid presentation, it really helps as far as dealing with objections. It may not eliminate them completely, but you've trained to a point that you know how to move with them and how to get back to your plan. So that's excellent. We do have
I,
just a
Brian, I love that analogy. I may steal that, like I steal
yeah.
lots of your ideas.
Look, Ken, it has to make sense to me. Okay, so just a few questions here. So how many the first one is how many objections should you field before walking away?
I'm going to field all the objections they have. I
Okay.
mean, and I'm going to keep throwing questions back at them.
Okay. So if they're still if they're still asking, just continue to answer. That if they haven't told you to leave immediately, just keep going.
Right, right.
That's good. Okay. And a few of the questions we had, this is kind of the same. Can we get a copy of your objection responses?
I'll put together kind of a list, and we'll send it out to everyone that's attended the webinar.
Okay, excellent. And then the last question here, it says, and this is probably a little bit loaded. How should I structure my presentation?
Okay,
So go ahead.
I was going to say it's going to depend on what product you're presenting.
Mhm. Okay. Okay. Yeah, because I'm sure, as you were saying, having a structured presentation is very important. So that's good. So at this point, Ken, it looks like that's all the questions that we did have come through. And I'm sure you'll probably get some via email. But I'm going to ask if you have anything in closing that you want to say to those who are attending right now.
The biggest thing I can say is that with the objections, the best way to handle the objections is basically having a solid presentation. I mean, they're
Mm,
not going to go away totally, but if your presentation is set up properly, and you go through the presentation, and um, you do it correctly, then it's going to reduce and minimize the objections you get. They'll never go away completely, but it
mm,
will reduce the objections.
it's good.
Because a lot of times, I mean, realistically, um, the objection is not because of the prospect. It's on us, and we're responsible for the objection that comes up, because a lot of times it's just the prospect doesn't clearly understand what we're saying.
Right. Right. So that's good. That's good. All right. Well, Ken, thank you so much. I appreciate you going through this process. I mean, this was definitely a presentation that was highly requested, as far as dealing with objections. And I know that it's something that, I mean, we deal with every day, whether we're sitting in front of a prospect or just in everyday life. So just knowing how to be more comfortable, I think sometimes being more comfortable and understanding what an objection is definitely helps. Once again, I want to thank all of you for taking time out of your day and being with us. Hopefully, what you learned today, you'll be able to apply to your business and it'll help you grow. If you are someone uh, that you think that you need a little more help as far as your sales process, you're not exactly sure how to move forward in certain processes, Ken has a blog on messerfinancial.com. Make sure that you go through and that you read some of the things that he has available to you. And not just that, if you go into our learning center, we also have past presentations, past webinars from Ken as far as sales principles, and you want to make sure that you go through those, listen to them, make sure that you apply those small subtle changes to your sales process, and I'm sure that you'll see a change. If you do have any questions at all about Messer in general, about being contracted, definitely contact us at 866-568-9649. If you're someone that's not contracted with Messer, you want to dial extension 7819, and one of our marketers will talk to you and let you know about all the different advantages that Messer does bring to our agents. If you have questions about contracting, definitely contact our producer support at producer support at messerfinancial.com, or you contact them at 866-568-9649, extension 7813. And also take a moment to check out our events calendar at messerfinancial.com. And we'll be having, just so you know, we have these webinar workshops throughout the year with valuable information. But once again, I want to thank you all for joining us. And I ask that you take care of yourselves and everyone around you. Have a great day.